A House Divided. We're going to talk about sectionalism in the U.S. 1846 to 1861. So, division in politics, the differences between North and South. John C. Calhoun states in 1850, North and South were equal when the Constitution was adopted. Now that equilibrium between the North and South no longer exists. He's talking about politically, and he's also talking about economically. So remember, the Three-Fifths Compromise helped to level the playing field for the playing field for the South, which it's still in existence at this period of time in 1850. But look at the economy. North industry pre-Civil War produced about 10% of U.S. goods. If you look at the South, agriculture produced 4 million bales of cotton in 1783, but in 1860, they produced 191 million bales of cotton just to the European markets. They produced another 4 million bales for local production here. So when you're looking at this equilibrium that John C. Calhoun's talking about in Congress, in representation, the South is not going to be represented how he feels as being equal, because the South is clearly the economic leader in the U.S. before the Civil War. So, slavery in a national necessity, or is it a brutal, immoral institution? Here's what Southerners believe. Southerners believe slavery was vital to the economy. The history of slavery goes back to the beginning of civilization itself. Courts defend slavery, property rights, the Fifth Amendment. Slaves, of course, it is a myth, somewhat of a myth, that slaves had no desire for freedom. And religion, of course, the Old Testament and even in the New Testament backs up slavery, that slavery existed throughout ancient history. So, abolition movement, they say that slavery is immoral, that it's unreasonable to hold people in captivity. They're going to use religion, the immorality of slavery and religion, and of course the economic argument, wage labor versus slave labor. Oh, and if you guys want to watch this, it's the abolitionist movement, about 12 minutes long. It's pretty good. It's PBS special. It's good. So in 1846, this representative from Pennsylvania, David Wilmot, he adds in this proviso to the Mexican war effort. Basically, he attaches this onto a appropriations bill for military spending in the Mexican-American War. And in this proviso, it says no slavery would be allowed in the Western territories. Of course, the Northerners support it. The Southerners don't. They need to get this bill passed, so a massive debate breaks out. And as you see, what comes out of this is the idea of popular sovereignty. Passion, as you see, stirred up on both sides over this proviso. Popular sovereignty is born out of this, and it said basically each new territory should should be allowed to decide for themselves what they wanted to be, slave state or not. So this actually appeals to Congress a lot, because it removes slavery from an issue. It removes slavery from national politics. Northerners and Midwesterners support it because they felt that basically mainly Northerners settled the West, so slavery was not going to be allowed out West anyway. One thing that everybody's overlooking here is the geography. Guys, when we win the Mexican War and we get the southwestern part of the U.S., it's mainly desert. There's not going to be a lot of farming. There's not going to be a lot of need for manufacturing and slave labor in that area anyway, but nobody looks at that as far as like politically. So they're probably going to end up being free states simply because of the geography of the area, but we will move on. So California in 1850 applies for statehood. As you see, you got 15 free, 15 slave states. California wants to be admitted as a free state. Of course, more debates erupt in Congress, sets up the Compromise of 1850. The House of Representatives will be lost for the South. However, they will be able to hold on to the Senate. Remember, this is political power. The House of Representatives based on the population. So when California is admitted, basically the abolitionists and Northerners will have a majority in the House of Representatives, but they can still hold on to the Senate. Southerners can. So, as you see, the Senate debates, North wanted abolition. The South wanted the North to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. They wanted more effective fugitive slave laws. So what's going to happen is Henry Clay will sit down and he will write his final compromise to keep us together as a nation. So here's what the compromise looked like. California is admitted as a free state, more effective and new fugitive slave laws. People in New Mexico and Utah have popular sovereignty to vote for or against slavery. The federal government will pay Texas $10 million and give up part of New Mexico Texas land. So basically, Texas will move its borders a little bit. Texas claimed the Rio Grande up to its source. This compromise pleases both sides because in the North it limits slavery. In the South, it helped pay for the Mexican War. This only cools tempers for about 10 years. It also upheld slavery in Washington, D.C. However, it abolished the slave trade across the boundaries. So in the northern part of Washington, D.C., it was a free states, Maryland and all those guys, or really Delaware and all those guys. But in the South, they were still slave. It denied Congress the authority to interfere with the interstate slave trade. So Congress couldn't control the slave trade, interstate. Calhoun and Webster's response. Calhoun wants slavery in the territories, but Webster appealed for national unity. This would be the last time Clay and Webster were on the same side of an issue. To be quite honest with you, Henry Clay's in bad health and he's going to be forced to retire here soon. The compromise is adopted and passed the second time through. Clay's in bad health. He retires. Stephen Douglas takes up the fight. That's going to be an important name throughout the 1750s. If it wasn't for Zachary Taylor's death in 1850, he dies July 9th, 1850. This actually helps the compromise out because Zachary Taylor was not signing the compromise. He wouldn't have signed it the second time. However, his vice president, hence new president, Milner Fillmore, supports the compromise. In September, the compromise is voted into law. So, protest, resistance, and violence, as you see here in the North, the Fugitive Slave Acts, resisting the law. The new Fugitive Slave Acts infuriates Northerners to the extent that 9 northern states passed personal liberty laws forbidding the imprisonment of fugitive slaves. Guys, this would be interposition. Okay, this would be the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions where these states are not going to enforce a federal law because they thought it was unconstitutional. Okay, so this would be the nullification theory. This would be all of that stuff, and it's in the North. Think about this. We don't talk about this a lot, but yes, this would be interposition here. Nine states work in unison to forbid the enforcing of a federal law. So, tension in Kansas and Nebraska. As you see, Douglas, he's a proponent of popular sovereignty. Let the territories choose whether or not they want slavery to exist. He pushes the Kansas-Nebraska Act through in 1854 and popular sovereignty. By 1855, as you see, there was enough of a population to vote on a legislature in the Kansas territory. And Nebraska pretty much was a foregone conclusion. They will not have slavery. But Kansas was a little bit on. Kansas is the southern brother of Nebraska, and Kansas was on the borderline there, so there's going to be a heated debate in Kansas. Foreign affairs. I do want to talk about this, even though we're talking about sectionalism. If you look, we're interested in Cuba. We have always been interested in Cuba. We kind of see them as the United States South or one of our southern states. To this day, we're interested in Cuba. So the Ostend Manifesto in 1854, it rationalized the U.S. purchase and annex of Cuba from Spain. However, in this treaty or in this manifesto, it implied the U.S. could go to war with Spain if Spain did not agree and give us Cuba. Okay, southern states, of course, want Cuba to add a slave state to offset Western expansion. Eventually, this manifesto is going to be scrapped and denounced. The authors here are Pierre Solé and future President, Secretary of State James Buchanan. As you see, the issue here is sectionalism. Southerners want this to add an extra state, slave state. It does show some expansionist aims too. So, foreign affairs. In Japan, 1853, President Pierce sent Commodore Matthew Perry, this gentleman here, over to Japan to open up trade relations. The U.S. Intimidated, it's supposed to say intimidated, not intimidated, but not intermediated, but intimidated and impressed with the U.S. modern weapons. The Japanese were in all of this Navy that we had, and all of these ships, as you see here, they sailed in with the black panels. We sailed in with the dark fleet or the black fleet. We intimidated them. We sent the full fleet in and basically intimidated and scared the Japanese people. The Treaty of Amenity or Kanagawa forced 2 ports in Japan to open to U.S. trade. Basically, from the beginning, the Japanese did not want to trade with us, but Commodore Perry informed them that he was also under orders of Franklin Pierce to kill the shogun or the leaders of Japan and fight a war and put people in power who would sign this treaty. Japan, being pretty smart, said China went through this whole thing with Britain in the Opium Wars. We don't want to do that, so they just opened 2 ports of trade. And it really changes Japan's history in that they will be an imperial power moving forward. So they're going to take a different track than China did. So this issue is imperialism. So Bleeding Kansas. What happens here? January 23rd, 1854. Kansas and Nebraska became open for territory. In 1855, they had a vote on slavery. Senator David Atchison from Missouri, he's a Missouri senator. He crosses the Mississippi River with 500 of his friends, and they helped throw the election for the pro-slavery side. Abolitionists, this, by the way, this is a federal offense. This is actually a voter fraud, and you can go to prison for it. Abolitionists set up a rival government in Topeka, Kansas, where they had an abolitionist government. Remember, Topeka, 100 years later, will be where Brown versus the Board of Education starts to end segregation. So, the sack of Lawrence, founded by abolitionists as well. Lawrence, Kansas is founded by abolitionists. A pro-slavery group called it an illegal town, and the townspeople were arrested. What happens after that? The Potawatomi Massacre, abolitionists were misinformed about Lawrence. They were told that the citizens of Lawrence were killed. So they went into Potawatomi, Kansas, and killed 5 pro-slavery men. Not only killed them, they beheaded them. And this was led by John Brown, the gentleman over here on the bottom right. As you see, he led the Potawatomi Massacre. He's a fanatic. He believed he received the calling from God. He thought he was the archangel that was supposed to come in and end slavery in America. So these events set off what is called Bleeding Kansas, where we had dozens of incidents in the Kansas territory and over 200 people were killed over the issue of slavery. And some historians call it the first battle of the American Civil War, but it is definitely a prelude to the Civil War and a sign of things to come. If you watch this talks about Bleeding Kansas here, this video. It's a good little video. So, we also have violence in the Senate. Okay, and we will pick up with this on our next slide, on our next screenocast.